Okay, welcome to the second event in the new Prospectus Literary Offerings Emerging Authors series. We decided to create this series to further support emerging writers who have always been the motivation behind Prospectus. The series features a review of a debut novel or collection of poems in our print issue, an interview on our blog, and a Zoom reading, all with considerable promotion through our social media. We deem it a privilege to be able to help first-time writers get their books read and reviewed. Our second participant in the Emerging Authors series is Brittany Ackerman, author of The Brittanys. Brittany Ackerman is a writer from Riverdale, New York. She earned her BA in English from Indiana University and graduated from Florida Atlantic University's MFA program in creative writing. Since graduation, she has completed a residency at the Wellstone Center in the Redwoods and has attended the Mont Blanc workshop in France under the instruction of Alan Heathcock. She has also attended the Writers by Writers Methil Valley workshop under the leadership of Ross Gay. She teaches general education at AMDA College and Conservatory of the Performing Arts in Hollywood, California. And she was the 2017 Nonfiction Award winner for Red Hen Press, as well as the AWP Intro Journals Project Award nominee in 2015. Her work has been featured in Electric Lit, Jewish Book Council, Lit Hub, Entropy, Los Angeles Review, and more. Her first collection of essays entitled The Perpetual Motion Machine was published with Red Hen Press in 2018. And her debut novel, The Brittanys, is out now with Vintage. The Brittanys has been described as a bittersweet, funny, and totally nostalgic foray into the minds of teenage girls and their secrets, betrayals, and dreams. It is a chronicle of 5 girls named Brittany in the early 2000s, all from similar privileged homes, forced into friendship by their names, parents, and classrooms. Brittany Rosenberg is gorgeous and wealthy. Brittany Gottlieb is a know-it-all. Brittany Tomasi is effortlessly cool. Brittany Jensen is an unapologetic tomboy. It's hard to say all these Brittany's. And our narrator, the 5th Brittany, is Jensen's best friend, a twosome within their fivesome. Here's some praise for Brittany's book. Sarah Gerard, author of True Love, says, quote, "I've never read any book that captures so perfectly all the sweet and bitter and mess and tenderness and hard lessons of being 14, nor the highly specific, totally unfakeable feeling of the year 2004. I found every page of this book to be the perfect mix of entertaining, satisfying, questioning, and moving," end quote. Rebecca Monroe of Book Reporter says, quote, "Funny, heartwarming, and full of nostalgia and vivid descriptions, The Brittanys is a solid read. If you've run out of episodes of Pen 15 or can't stand another binge watch of Gossip Girl, this is a perfect palate cleanser." Alice Martin, a freelance writer and editor, says, "The precision and accuracy with which Ackerman captures this particular early 2000s period of American adolescence makes for a richly nostalgic portrait of lost time. The sometimes absurd but often recognizable details of this moment, the smell of Eggo waffles in the toaster, a Nokia flip phone as a status symbol, learning to play Nintendo 64 games to impress sophomore boys, contribute to the sense of humor and retrospective self-awareness, even while the novel always treats its narrator with a tender generosity. And while the narrator's adventures in the realm of romance and sex form the basis of the plot, it is the poignant female relationships between best friends and mothers and daughters that reveal the story's true soul. Amidst the satirical mentions of half Coke, half Sprite mixtures and prepubescent boys who look like the stars of Jackass, Ackerman locates an achingly realistic but unsentimentally clear-eyed portrait of the youthful relationships that end but are truly never over. You can also see Pam Anderson's review and interview on the Prospectus blog. Okay, now let's unmute and give a big round of applause to Brittany and begin the reading section of this program. Brittany, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Celia, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to everybody that's here and everyone watching on the old YouTube as well. I am going to read from kind of like smack dab in the middle of the book. This is actually, I know my Andrew Furman, who is one of my professors at FAU, he will appreciate this because this was another one of my professors, Becca, my thesis chair, this was her favorite part of the book. She texted me and told me that it was her favorite part. So I was like, I'm going to read that part. I haven't read this part. And I try to read different parts of the book every time I do a reading. And yeah, so this is about halfway through. The narrator, I'll just give a little one sentence thing here. The narrator is on a date and they're at the movies. During the previews, I tell Stephen I'm going to use the bathroom. I find my way out of the dark theater. I check my hair in the mirror. The Coral Springs humidity has puffed it up a bit in the back, so I run my hands under cold water and smooth it down. I reapply my lip gloss, then wipe it off with a paper towel, realizing that if we do kiss, he's not going to want lip gloss all over his lips. I stare into the mirror in the bathroom and tell myself that if Stephen tries to kiss me, I'll let him. It'll be okay. I've kissed before and I'll kiss again. If it happens, it happens. Next to me, a mom is helping her young daughter wash her hands because she is too small to reach the sink. The mom is holding her up by her bottom, and the little girl is rubbing her hands together under the water, making them clean. I feel bad for being mean to my mom when she was just trying to help me and be nice. She's been through all this stuff before, dating and drama. It's hard for me to picture her stuffing her bra and talking to boys, hoping to get kissed. But it happened, and I wonder how much of it she remembers, how often she thinks about it. I wonder how much of it will happen to me when I grow up. The little girl plops down onto the floor and lets her mom hold her little clean hand as they walk out of the bathroom. I remember on a trip to the Cayman Islands when I was 6 years old, I started to worry about the day my mom would die. It came on suddenly out of nowhere. I became obsessed with the idea that she was going to die one day and leave me alone on this earth. I couldn't imagine a life with only my dad and my brother, one where my mom wouldn't be there to comfort me through all of life's tragedies. I kept the fear to myself for the whole trip until the very last night, when we went to this crazy restaurant that had parrots flying around as part of their kitsch. Something about the parrots, their brightly colored bodies flitting around the room, the way my brother didn't even look up from his Game Boy and my dad was so focused on his steak, made me feel an immense pang of doom in my little heart, and I burst into tears. My mom took me to the restaurant's bar, far away from the birds, and I finally told her I was upset because she was going to die. She told me that yes, it was true, but it wouldn't happen for a long time. She promised we'd live our whole lives together and that she'd always be there for me. She was young and healthy, and I was young and healthy, and we'd have plenty of time to be happy and live. The bartender slid me a glass of water with a circle of lemon in it, and I remember thinking how the lemon looked like the sun. I took it to be a sign that she was right, that I shouldn't worry about her dying because it wouldn't happen for a long time, and that instead I should enjoy and appreciate her while I could. I often had moments like this, moments of extreme, almost holy appreciation for my mom. These times ended with promises to be nicer, to be better. But the surge of promises would always get lost in the ebb and flow of daily trials, the emphasis placed on all the wrong things. I look in the mirror and wish I had curled my hair like my mom suggested instead of straightening it. My hair is so pin straight and lifeless. I run my hands under the sink's hot water and then through my hair to rough it up, a big mistake. I flip my head over a few times to dry it, but two girls younger than me walk in and I leave quickly, embarrassed, forgetting another juncture of awareness as I so often did. I walk back to the theater and find Stephen with his arm around my seat, waiting. The previews end and the movie begins. The movie is pretty cheesy, but we both watch intently. Stephen's hand moves from the back of my seat to his own armrest and remains there for the entirety of the feature. I keep looking at it, willing it to go around me, and it does not. When the movie's over, we walk outside without touching and wait for his mom. We don't speak. And I feel like I did something wrong. There's been a shift in the night, and I realize how cold I am in a skirt. I hug my denim jacket around me, and Steven still makes no move to hold me or keep me warm. I wonder what the hell is going on in his head. He's so quiet, I could die. His mom asks us how the movie was, and I do all the talking. I tell her about the beautiful, quirky girl and how the nerdy guy is in love with her, but she wins a date with the celebrity hunk and has to decide who will be her true love. When we get back to his house, my mom is already there, and I'm glad. I hug Steven goodbye, and he waves like an idiot. I thank his mom for everything, and she gives my mom an obligatory smile and a wave as we drive off. I fall asleep in the car. I forget about how cold I am. I forget about my bad outfit choice. I forget about how Steven said we were barely going to watch the movie, but didn't even make one move on me. I forget about all of it and drift off, sleeping so deeply that when we arrive back at home, I'm still dreaming as I walk in the house and upstairs to my room. I'm glad my mom let me off the hook of having to disclose to her any information about the date. I change into shorts and a big t-shirt. I take off my makeup and brush my teeth and get into bed. I don't want to think about any of it. I dream I'm on a plane going somewhere far away. I'm afraid of the long flight, but I'm already on it. I'm not sure how long I've been up in the air. I suppose it's something like 24 hours. I start to walk the rows and everyone else is sleeping. I find a stewardess and she tells me to go back to sleep. I ask for a soda. She says, it's not time for drinks, it's time for sleep. She guides me back to my seat, but someone is in it, sleeping. There are no open seats except at the back of the plane. She leaves me there, and I try to get comfortable, but the seats are smaller and upright and don't go back. All of a sudden, my mom walks up to the row and sits next to me. I ask her for a soda. She says to rest on her shoulder until we land. I ask her where we're going, and she says home. I ask about the trip, wherever we were supposed to be going. She says, no, we're going home, just home. I lie with my head on her shoulder and look out the window. The night sky remains still and blue.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see. Brittany, I have some questions for you. Thank you for such a wonderful reading. Let me see, you started out as a nonfiction writer, a very successful one. Do you think you'll go back to nonfiction now, or is there another novel in the works?
So as of last Thursday, I have finished another draft of a novel that I've been working on for this entire pandemic. And I don't know what's going to happen with that, but it's not in my hands right now. So that's kind of horrifying, but I'm done with that, but I can't seem to get away from the nonfiction. I definitely want to write another like more mature kind of another book of essays that's more centered on, at first I thought it was going to be about both my parents, but I'm pretty obsessed with, I mean, as you probably saw in even this fictional passage, I'm pretty obsessed with my mom right now. I recently took a trip up the coast with her, and I hadn't seen her, for a long time. And we spent a week together in a car. So lots of material there. And yeah, I'm still working on essays, and I kind of dabble in all of it except poetry. That is where I don't know, I love to read poetry and I have such a profound respect for it, but it's just not my genre of writing. So I kind of, I always have like one big project that I'm working on, and then the essays kind of feel like when something comes up in my life, I try to tackle it in the form of an essay, hopefully letting a little time go by. But I think as a progression of what I'm looking to maybe publish, I have this novel that I just finished, and then I have another idea for a third one. It's sort of a trilogy, with the Brittanys being kind of the first one. So I don't know, that's all I can really say about it right now, but definitely interested in all genres. I am not done with nonfiction, and it is not done with me.
That's awesome. Wow. Trilogy. Do you keep a journal?
Uh, I don't have like an active journal right now, but I have a newsletter that I kind of use as like a therapy device slash journal. I mean, I take little notes on things, or like I have like a bunch of sticky notes in my on my desk on my computer. I have them like the virtual sticky notes. I love those. So I take a lot of like one line kind of notes, or like words or phrases that I'll just save. Um, but I don't necessarily have like a journal that I write in every day. Kind of like as I get ideas, I'll just put them aside in, in a specific place.
I ask because you've been praised so much for just the kind of specificity of the details that you provide, and I'm wondering, where is that coming from? So I thought maybe you kept a journal, but it's even more, it makes even more sense that you have, little post-its all over the place.
Yeah. Well,
You-
yeah, that was a huge question I got with the Britneys, was did you have a journal from that time? And I did keep a journal when I was in high school. It was I got my first very shitty laptop when I was, I think, in like 10th grade. And I had like a very emo journal on there, just like, I hate Derek, or just whatever it was. So the journal wasn't very helpful. It was like really just annoying, actually. So I had to really go back to just the feeling of that time. And I did do a lot of research of like even for that scene that I just read about the movie. I remember in editing, my publisher was like, oh, the movie that you have in there, like that didn't come out in 2004. Like that came out in like 2008 or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I had to like pick a movie that I had seen in a theater in that year, which was When a Date with Tad Hamilton. That was the movie that she goes to see in the book. So yeah, I didn't have a journal that had any with any help for me. But yeah, that was a question I got a lot, and it's more like me just trying to capture like the feeling of those moments.
It's amazing though how well you remember everything. Okay, so you're very young, and this is your first novel. Could you talk a little bit about how you got into vintage? What was that like?
Yeah, so it's actually like a very long, arduous tale, but I'll do a syncopated version. But for my first collection that I wrote, my first book of essays that I wrote in graduate school, I didn't have representation for that. I had gotten advice from actually it's really random, but I worked once with a poet, Laurent Bachelard, and she was like, you got to submit to contests. Like that is the way to go if you're a young writer just starting out. And so I was like, okay, because it's like $20 here and there to like submit to these contests, which it does, it adds up. You got to set the money aside. And Red Hen was one of them. And I submitted in 2016 or 2015, whatever cycle that was. I submitted to their nonfiction contest and I won. So you get, a little bit of money for that, and you get publication. And I kind of used that as the jumping, the jumping off point for trying to then get an agent and get representation. So just, literally going on poetsandwriters.com, looking up who is accepting literary fiction, looking at what work they've represented, and then just emailing a bunch of agents kind of blindly. There were some people that I had an in with, or some people that like I really loved one of the authors that they represented. So, you make it like a more poignant letter. But the agent that I have now, Mark Falcon, I didn't know anything about him. I just saw he was accepting literary fiction, and we just kind of hit it off right away. And we're very close. I love Mark, and he's been so helpful in my career thus far. And he's the one that sent the book off to Vintage and just thought that it would be a good fit. And and luckily they agreed and placed it there. I know some other places were looking at it too, but with agents, they usually try to submit to, top places first. They have tiers, the same way that writers have tiers of submissions. Yeah, just, I don't know, luck, timing, all of that. I don't know. I feel also like the 2000s, the early 2000s, or the early aughts in specific, are really having a moment right now, with like fashion and the trends coming back. And there's a lot of books taking place in this time period. So I think it was just a good fit. And yeah, I've been really loving working with vintage, but that was kind of the trajectory. It wasn't just 1, 2, 3. It was years and years of waiting and writing and wishing and hoping and all of that.
Great payoff, though. I'm so
Yeah.
happy for you. In one of your interviews, you mentioned that you were interested in the idea of consequences, as in what kind of consequences these girls experience for their actions. What do you think are the consequences of being a teenage girl?
Yeah, I love that question because me talking about that in whatever interview or podcast I did, was that actually stemmed from something that when this book was actually just a collection of short stories, and I was workshopping it in Chamonix with Alan Heathcock and a group of writers there. There was like a group of women in my workshop that got like, I don't want to say angry, but like there was like a heated discussion of, why are there no consequences for these girls? Like, why is nothing, they don't get punished, which some of them do get punished in the book, but by their parents or whatever. But there was no like real consequences the way that you might see in a novel. Like if a character gets hurt, they get hurt, or if, they get in trouble, they really get in trouble. This kind of took place in that Boca Raton glittery world of no consequence. And so I think I said that because like, I remember somebody coming up to me after that workshop and they were like, are you okay? Like, that seemed like real. And I was like, no, that was a really good point that person made. Like, I'm glad that discussion happened because it made me think about consequence, and it made me think about the lack of consequence in this book. And I think that's why the italicized parts of it were such an integral factor to the book working, because we needed to know that like the narrator grew up and has either not gotten over certain things or is still kind of like thinking about them, dealing with them. We needed to know like the anxiety that happens in her life, that is a consequence of some of these situations. I think that having that future, point of view shows that there is a consequence, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's like, oh, I don't really think about that person anymore, but I just know that they went to this boot camp thing, or they went to a boarding school or whatever. So it was a really important thing to be asked of like, well, what happens to these girls? And then your question of just like, what do I think is the consequence? I think it really depends, because I think sometimes it can look like the typical things, it can look like getting grounded, getting your car taken away, getting TV taken away, getting allowance taken away, whatever that might look like physically. But I think a lot of the time it can be emotional too. And I think I talk about this with my students a lot in class, that sometimes when you grow up in a household where there aren't a whole lot of consequences and you don't get things taken away, that actually can be doing you a huge disservice once you enter the real world and see that there are consequences. And it left me personally a little like ill prepared for certain things. Yeah, not always great. Not always like a reward to not, having been punished for certain things. But yeah, I think it can look all different types of ways. I think it can manifest in the usual physical things, or it can be something years later that comes up emotionally for people.
I got to tell you, I know that mindset really well. I'm from Miami, and I taught at a really elite prep school, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and I love it that you didn't think, you weren't trying to be like a 90210 kind of mindset where the first time you take a drink, you immediately wind up crashing your car. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
so unrealistic. It's true, you know, there's a lot of kids that are just getting away with murder, and eventually it comes back, but it doesn't necessarily come back immediately and clearly. So I thought that that was really realistic and wonderful. Um, okay. In the Palm Beach Daily News 2021 summer reading list, they listed the Brittanys under YA, young adult. Do you consider it YA?
I personally don't, but I have never really been like a stickler for how people want to read my work. It doesn't bother me if someone considers it as such. I don't think any like less of any genre. I just think that it's more like literary fiction because of the subject matter and because it's not super plotty. I mean, there's kind of no plot in my book, actually. If you look on Goodreads, people really care that there's no plot. But I think in YA, there's it's usually like much more structured in the form of like a, I don't want to say like a normal narrative, but a kind of typical like beginning, middle, end, where this is just not that. It's kind of more slice of life. It is what it is. So I think for me is what distinguishes it between the two. But yeah, I mean, as long as people are talking about the book, I don't care what they're saying. I kind of feel we had some friends for dinner last night, and we were talking about the movie The Green Knight, which I love the movie, but my husband had some other feelings about it. And we had this like 30-minute discussion about the movie. And he was like, you know what? The good thing about that movie is that we're all talking about it. And so that's kind of how I feel about my writing as well. If as long as people are talking about it, that's fine by me. If they, like it, don't like it, if they think it's YA, not. But that's what differentiates it for me, is just the structure, I think, mostly.
That's great. You know, I think it just gets lumped in with YA because it's about teenage girls, and
Yeah.
I don't agree that that's a YA book, but so I'm glad you said that. Okay, so you know that Perspectives focuses on beginning writers. Do you have any advice about anything at all that you could tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the questions that I get the most from even my own students, or just like workshops that I've been in or workshops I've led, are always questions about publishing, and are always questions about like, how do you get published? Like, how do I get my book out? Like agents, blah, blah. And my first question back is always like, well, what is your project about? And like, what are you working on? And a lot of the time people don't know, or they don't have ideas, or it's not done yet, or they've got 10 pages, or whatever it is. And that's all fine. There's no like right or wrong place to be. But I think that if you are going to start thinking about publishing, you really have to have the meat and bones, or meat and potatoes. Meat has bones. I don't know. You have to have the meat of your project, and you have to know what you're doing. And when I first start out writing like a novel, like I guess it was like 8 months ago when I started this last project, I didn't know what it was. I couldn't even begin to think about sending it to my agent or sending it to anyone at that point. Like, I'm still figuring out what it is. And I still, even though it's done, I'm still trying to figure out what it is. Like, what's the hook? What's on the surface? What's below the surface? Like, so I think it's just about, my biggest piece of advice would just be like, do the work first and figure it out for yourself. You don't want other people to figure it out for you. I think it's really good to do workshops and to get, like, I would be so lost if I hadn't taken some of these short stories originally and then brought it to workshop and had some eyes on it. But I had like something to bring, like I had something to say at that point. I think that people sometimes become really obsessed with publishing when they're not ready yet. So that would just be my biggest piece of advice, is like, just do the work, and that is what being a writer is. It's not publish, it's not this, it's not publishing, it's not that, it's doing the work. And I really learned how to do that when I was in grad school, because I had this idea for my first book about, I want to write stories about my brother, like I want to write essays about our childhood, but I didn't know like how to make that happen and how to actually sit down and do it. And I mean, we had a joke in the program of like tweaking on a project. It's like, that's what you have to do. And even like the week that I've taken off from working, since I finished this last draft, I'm like ready to get back into another draft. Like I just want to be working again because I feel most sane. So yeah, that would be my advice, is just do the work. Don't be afraid of the work. Don't romanticize it. Don't don't undercut it. Like, just, it is what it is. It's work and it has to be done. And you're the only person that can do it.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's the best advice. Do the work. It's incredible how many people don't grasp that. So thank you very much. Let's open it up to questions from the audience. I have one here on the chat from Andrew Furman. He's wondering how you decide what to write as nonfiction and when it would work better in fiction.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I recently had the immense pleasure of talking to Elena Passarello, and we were talking about some essays that I had written, because I was really focused on another essay collection at one point, and then I just got frustrated and kind of put it aside, but to work on this other thing. But something that she told me was, in an essay, there always has to be like an inquiry in the essay. Like the essay has to be like asking a question about something, whether it's the speaker that's asking a question or like a society is asking a question, like who you are as a writer and like why you are telling this experience. And that really changed, honestly, that like changed the way I thought about essay, because I was always kind of confused of like, well, when do I write something as nonfiction? When is it an essay? When is it creative nonfiction? When is it just, should it be a fictional story? I didn't really know. I kind of just went on feeling. And what would happen to me a lot is like, I would start writing a short story and then I'd be like, oh, this is an essay. Or I would write an essay and I'd be like, not really wanting to write this as an essay. I think I should fictionalize this. But now moving forward, I feel like I have more clarity of, well, if I'm asking these questions about, my family history and about, like I'm doing a lot of writing around like eating disorder with like between my mom and I, and about like growing up in New York as a Jewish woman. And like, those are things that I'm probably going to have a lot of questions around. Whereas some of the stories and all of the novels that I write as fiction, they're not really so much based around questions as they're based around maybe like unresolved feelings that in writing the novel, I feel like I have a lot of freedom to rewrite things or rewrite people, or, like the one that I just finished, I don't and can't say too much about it, but it's about college and very loosely based on my own college experience. And so I don't necessarily have like I don't want to write an essay about college, or about sororities or any of that, which I don't know, maybe that would be fun. But I was really interested in just telling the story of like a young woman in the Midwest in a Jewish sorority. I'm also like, what I read also really influences. I mean, I know that Andy knows this, but I just finished my first Rachel Cusk book. And I was like, essays, like I just want to write so many essays. And then now I'm reading two things right now. I'm reading Brandon Taylor's Filthy Animals. So good. Recommend it to everyone. And I'm also reading The Pisces, and that's a novel, very crazy, weird, like mermaid stuff novel. So I'm very influenced by what I'm reading too. Like if I'm reading a novel, I sometimes gravitate towards that form, or if I'm just like really influenced by it. And then reading like the Brandon Taylor stories, I'm like, oh, I want to write a collection, but that, I don't know, a collection of short stories feels like the hardest thing to write for me. I don't know how people do it. That seems so challenging to me, but yeah, so that's kind of, as of right now, how I view when it's right for me to write nonfiction versus fiction. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I can imagine how to write creative nonfiction. That's, to me, that's like mind blowing. Like, I have to tell the truth. What?
Yeah, well, so I'll talk about that for a second too, because that's, I know no one asked, but I know that is usually a huge question that I get for, with my first book was like, how do you feel okay, like telling stories about your brother or writing about your family? Like, and yeah, I mean, first of all, if you do write a book about people that are alive and that are in your life and that know you, you do have to have them be okay with it. Like it is, on a legal standpoint, they have to know and they have to be okay with it. So for my first book, my brother knew that I was, it's a collection. My brother's a recovering addict and has some, mental illness as well. And the book is about our childhood and stories, and from that time growing up, kind of up until my college years. And yeah, I had him read it. I had him help me with some of it, which was interesting, the way that we remembered certain things differently. But ultimately, there were some things maybe that he was like, okay, these things are off limits. I don't want you to write about these things, or like, please don't write about these things. And these things like, oh, well, why didn't you write about this? Don't you remember this thing that happened? Like, why don't you want to write about that? One of them being this crazy experience that our family had with pigeons, which is turning into an essay that would be in the next book or whatever, but that I had kind of like blocked out, I guess, because I was so traumatized by it. So that was helpful. My mom can sometimes have problems with things that I write, but my mom will have a problem sometimes, even if it's something that's fictional. Like she'll be like, that mom character, she seems like someone, and I'm just like, it's fiction because it's not something I have an issue with anymore. It's not something I'm navigating. It's the feeling of it. And maybe I felt that at a point in time, but like, I'm over it. I love you. It's all good. Um, but yeah, I get a lot of that question about like permission. And I heard Sheila Heti talk about this once, and she was very adamant of like, write the thing first, get the permission later. Like the whole idea of like, it's easier to ask for forgiveness rather than, permission. And I agree. Like I didn't tell my brother about the book until I wrote it, and then was able to give him the manuscript and be like, here it is. So that would be my advice for that too, that no one was asking for, that if you are writing about your family or you're writing about personal things, like you should write it no matter what, no matter if you end up trying to get it published or it just sits in a drawer. Like you should write it for you, right? It's your point of view, it's your story. But yeah, if those people are still living and they know you and they know where you live, then you kind of have to let them know. But it kind of is easier if you have something and then they can see it. If they want, half of the time people don't even want to see it. They're just like, oh, okay, great. But if they do, then at least you can be like, okay, well, here it is. And now you can look at it, rather than, well, I haven't written it yet, but because then they might say like, well, don't write about this, or I don't want you, make me look like that, and they'll try to give you input. And you're like, okay, this isn't a writer's room. This is just my personal thing. So that would be my kind of my hot take on the nonfiction permission aspect there.
That's awesome. Thank you. I can't wait to read that pigeon thing. That
Pretty
sounds
wild.
pretty interesting. Okay, does anyone else have a question? You want to unmute yourself or?
Hey Brittany, how you doing? I just
Hey.
finished reading the book today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Between classes, I got to the last chapter today. The level of detail, and by the way, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The level of detail, this is going to be a very professor question. Okay. The level of detail in the book really reminded me of Karen Russell's Swamplandia. And one of the reasons why I was hesitant to read your book after the first 100 pages was that feeling like a sexual assault is coming, which is so common in coming of age female narratives. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about like a book like Bunny by Mona Awad, and this is it's such a trope. Was that ever part of a draft of this, or did you never even, did you want to break from that trope, or did you never even considered it? Because that was one of the reasons why I kind of like, I really like these characters, especially the narrator. And I would hate, like, they would go into the movie theater and I'm like, oh shit, is this what's gonna happen? And
Yeah,
then I would finish that chapter and I'm like, okay, it's not that part.
yeah. That's such an interesting experience to have while reading, of like waiting for the big bad wolf, you know? It's definitely something that came up in edits, just the kind of plotlessness of it all. And that there was no, it kind of goes back to the consequence thing. It's actually something that has come up in the writing of my next book, because when I was in college, unfortunately, there was some situations that I went through that are closer to that kind of thing, that have been fictionalized for the purposes of that novel. And also the character is older, more mature, more around that kind of stuff. I mean, I went to a private prep school that is very much like the one in the Brittanys, and I was sheltered from a lot of things, and I didn't have those kind of experiences, or even really know the depth of those kind of experiences until I went off to college. But it is interesting to have that kind of feeling of that reading, of waiting for something kind of bad to happen, because I mean, now I know I mentioned it, there's like a line in the book about about Parkland and like the school shooting, and kind of how in my time in high school, like I didn't think about that stuff. It wasn't prevalent, maybe there was like one or two in like other states, but it never my school, like never my city, never us, and there's a kind of like goldenness about that is encapsulated in the book, but it also has this kind of dark feeling, because it's like, now knowing that it did happen in Florida, it happened to, I know teachers at that school, like I know kids that went there, I had friends that went there, people that live in that area. Now it is close to home, and I was kind of more going for the feeling of like, I think we can't, like that question of, can we even ever get that back, like that innocence of not, like you're going to school and all you're worried about is like, do my socks match, or like, do I have the latest hairstyle, or like, am I, is this boy going to like me? And you're not worried about your safety or your well-being, for the most part. It's kind of this free lack of consequence time that I personally don't think that we can get back. Unfortunately, we just live in a different place now. But yeah, I think it's definitely relatable that you had that experience, because that is the kind of the structure of a novel. Usually you're like waiting for the big bad wolf. And I think that in this book, the characters can be that big bad wolf for themselves. And I think the narrator, like, I think out of all the characters, the narrator is kind of the most, I mean, she's the one that writes, like she's the most judgmental, and she's the most in her head, and can be her own biggest darkness, and, in times, but definitely thought about that more, and kind of implemented that kind of a plot point more in, in future projects.
Yeah, I thought that, and damn the plotlessness, people. I mean, what your book took me back to like stolen Budweisers and listening to the Purple Rain soundtrack, and nothing bad happened in 1984.
Yeah.
That's what it took me back to. And it's just, hanging out, drinking beer, listening to Prince, and then going back to the cul-de-sac. That's exactly what it felt like. There was nothing bad happened, nothing egregious. And it was nice. It was the nostalgia, although my nostalgia is 30 years older than your nostalgia. It got me in that nostalgic mode in a very beautiful way. So thank you once again.
Oh, thank you. And, and it's not to say that like people in that age don't have a bad experience, or live in it, that we all lived through that time in our lives and came out unscathed. I mean, I'm not, but my experience, and especially my fictionalized experience, is not everyone's experience. And the book is not about everyone. I think it can be for everyone, because even if you had a much harsher teenhood than the characters in the book do, there's still glimmers that maybe, you know, people can pull from, or like I said, the feeling of it might be, because I know not everyone went to like a private prep school in South Florida. You know, it's not about relating to that experience. It's about relating to that, and maybe it's smaller for some people than others, but like the carefree time of adolescence. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That really means a lot to me. I see another question in the chat from Katie. Hi, Katie. Thank you. Katie said, growing up in LA, I often forget the setting is in Florida. I'm curious how much you feel that overlap living in LA now. Yeah, so funny thing really quick. So my husband's a filmmaker, and I kind of definitely use him as a tool when my books come out. I'm like, okay, we're gonna make a book trailer. And so for both of my books that are out take place in Florida. Yes, husband as a tool. Yes. What are they for? Right. So for both book trailers, we had to film them out here. The first one, I don't remember why, like we just couldn't go back to Florida. It was just like too much since we did it out here. But for the Brittanys, I mean, we had to film it like during quarantine. We couldn't like get actors to come out or anything, because the first one I had some actors come and help. And those are all on my website. And if anyone wants to look, they're cute. But so the second one, I was like, you know, we can't do something that is super plotty because we're going to be, you know, in California, but let's just do something that tries to encapsulate, you know, the feeling. And also, like, I'm in my 30s now, I'm not 14 anymore. So I know I don't look like that character anymore, but I was like, we'll just kind of make it what it is. And, but about the writing part of it, with the setting being in Florida, I still do try to get back to Florida at least once a year. And it is a place that's very, I don't think I'll ever be done writing about Florida. I don't necessarily consider myself like a Florida writer, because I'm from New York originally. But it's definitely got a special weird little place in my heart. I definitely have a lot of feelings every time I go back, and it's just very unique. And I think that how much of it overlaps, I mean, kind of a lot. I mean, it's a very similar climate, definitely more humid in Florida, more rain, I mean, I don't even remember the last time it rained in LA, honestly, which is really bad for fire season. So a little bit, I mean, a lot of overlap. But living in LA now, I don't know, a lot of my short stories are set in LA because a lot of my short stories take place like people in their 20s. And I was here in my 20s, and then I went back to Florida for grad school, and then I came back out here. So kind of just, it's more emphasized on like what time period I was and, you know, where I was living. And then I kind of write about that. Yes, LA's wetter sibling. I love that. LA's wetter, and I would argue a little bit crazier. I mean, I just saw that video of the guy that captured the alligator in his trash can from Florida. Amazing video, really, really courageous stuff there, doing God's work. But yeah, they're very similar. The thing that I actually have a hard time writing about is New York, because I was so young when I lived there. And the pigeon piece, for example, takes place in New York. So that is when I have to like call up my mom and be like, what did our kitchen look like? Like, what was the tile? Like, which direction was the window facing? Like, because Florida, I can tell you everything. I know every room of that house that we lived in and every room of our apartment that we moved into. But with New York, it's kind of a little splotchy. But yeah, very weird with alligators. Yeah, thank you for the questions. These are awesome.
Thank you, Brittany, so much. You're a wonderful reader and so funny, and thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, someone needs to know, Andrew needs to know more about the pigeons. We're gonna find out later about that, I guess. So thank you so much for being here tonight with us. We're really thrilled to have you. I have a couple of things to say before we wrap it up. Please pre-order a copy of issue 5 at the discount rate of $12.50, and visit the Prospectus blog on our website, prospectusliterary.com, to read Pam's review of the Brittanys and interview with Brittany. If you're a writer and would like to participate in the Emerging Authors Series, please also visit our website where you will find instructions on how to apply. And while you're there, please sign up for our monthly newsletter so you can stay on top of opportunities and events. Also follow us on social media at Prospectus Literary on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, and at Prospectus 2012 on Twitter. We also have a page now on LinkedIn, so you can follow us there as well. So that's it for tonight. Thank you one more time. Lovely, lovely, lovely reading. And we hope to see you again soon when that pigeon story comes out. I know you won't be a new writer anymore, but maybe we can make an exception. And check our website and our social media for when this video will be posted. Okay, I'll probably do it tonight. So.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for
Have a round of
coming.
applause for Brittany. Thank you.
Right.
All right,
Good night, everyone.
Good night, good afternoon, good morning.